Have you ever caught yourself just replaying the exact same negative thoughts over and over again? You know the ones. That relentless inner critic that whispers, oh, I'm definitely going to bomb this presentation, or I'm just not smart enough for this. It's like a broken record, right? And it's exhausting. But here's the absolute truth we're unpacking today. The internal dialogue you have with yourself literally shapes your entire reality. It doesn't just put you in a bad mood, it genuinely dictates your decisions and the whole trajectory of your life. Welcome to today's explainer. Today, we are tackling that inner voice head on. Our mission here is to interrupt those toxic automatic patterns and actually rewire your mind for real growth. We're going to do this using a fantastic toolkit straight from our source material. 12 incredibly actionable questions designed to challenge your assumptions and, quite frankly, completely transform the way you think. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our structured roadmap for rewiring those thoughts. First, the inner voice problem. Second, reality checking your thoughts. Third, cultivating radical self-compassion. Fourth, shifting to future focus. And fifth, creating your new dialogue. All right, starting off with section 1, the inner voice problem, and specifically the brain's built-in negativity bias. So why exactly do our brains do this to us? Well, we're actually hardwired to focus on threats. It's a primal survival mechanism. But what's really interesting about this slide is how it visually contrasts those wild, swirling assumptions our inner voice invents right alongside the actual balanced scale of objective facts. Because of this negativity bias, our inner critic leans heavily into exaggerated feelings and completely ignores the evidence. We have to actively learn how to step back and weigh the facts. Which brings us to section 2, reality checking your thoughts, or how to separate fact from fiction. Let's look at the first thematic bucket of questions in our toolkit. Question 1, is this thought actually true? Number 2, what evidence contradicts this negative thought? And 3, am I being fair to myself? When you pause to ask these, you are literally forcing your brain to pull up a mental list of counterexamples. Like if you're convinced you're terrible at your job, force yourself to remember that major project you absolutely crushed last month. You're training your mind to actively look for balanced evidence, instead of just defaulting to absolute doom and gloom. There's this brilliant quote from the text that I love. Most of our negative self-talk is based on assumptions, not facts. I really want you to let that sink in. Actually questioning your thoughts gives you this much-needed space between raw, in-the-moment emotion and reality. And look, asking if you're being fair to yourself, that doesn't mean you're suddenly lowering your standards. Not at all. It just means you're acknowledging the full context of a situation instead of blindly throwing yourself under the bus. Let's transition to section 3, cultivating radical self-compassion. Shifting from harsh judgment to kindness. This bucket is all about turning that grace we usually reserve for others inward. What would I say to a friend in this situation? What am I grateful for right now? And what do I need right now? You know, that last one is a real game changer. Sometimes massive negative self-talk is literally just a flashing dashboard light telling you a basic physical or emotional need isn't being met. You might not be having an existential crisis. You might just be exhausted or hungry or craving some connection. Address those basic needs and watch how fast that inner critic quiets down. Let's zoom in on this one for a second. What would I say to a friend in this situation? Think about how drastically your perspective shifts with just this one question. If a good friend messes up, you don't berate them, right? You offer them perspective, maybe a little grace and encouragement. Flipping the script like this brilliantly interrupts the critic and lets you treat yourself with the exact same compassion you'd naturally give to someone you really care about. Moving right along to section 4, shifting to future focus to get us out of that feeling of paralysis. These next questions are your absolute best tools for forward momentum. What can I learn from this experience? What's the best that can happen? How will this matter in 5 years? What would my future self thank me for? And what small step can I take right now? By focusing on the lessons and visualizing the best-case scenarios instead of catastrophizing, we essentially unlock our creativity. It prompts us to take those small, manageable actions to actually move forward. So, the crucial point is that visualizing positive outcomes actually increases your likelihood of achieving them. Shifting your focus to possibility rather than disaster doesn't just make you feel a little better today, it actively aligns your daily actions with long-term success. It pulls you out of a state of fear and limitation and drops you right into a mindset of motivation and confidence. Which leads us to our final section, part 5, creating your new dialogue and actually putting this all into practice. Okay, so how do we make this a habit in our daily lives? It boils down to a simple 3-step procedure. Step 1, Notice the automatic negative thought. Step 2, pause and just acknowledge it without judging yourself for having it. And step 3, ask one of your new empowering questions to shift the perspective. A really great tip from the source material is to start small. Don't try to memorize all 12 questions today. Just pick 1 or 2 favorites, write them on sticky notes, and put them somewhere you'll see them every morning. Now, I want to make a very clear distinction here. There is a massive difference between toxic positivity, which is basically forcing fake cheer and denying reality, and realistic optimism. This toolkit, it is definitely not about pretending everything is perfectly fine when it's clearly not. It is about examining your truth and finding balance. You can absolutely acknowledge real, tough challenges while still questioning if your harshest, most negative self-criticisms are actually accurate. 2 to 4. This directly answers one of the most frequently asked questions from the source material. How long does it take to actually change these deeply ingrained mental habits? While everybody's journey is unique, most people who consistently practice these techniques notice real, tangible shifts in their self-talk in just 2 to 4 weeks. Let's move to and see how this builds over time, because rewiring your brain is a gradual practice, not some overnight magic trick. In week 1, you're mostly just catching those negative thoughts as they happen. By week 2, you're actively challenging them with your sticky note questions. And by week 4, you'll likely notice your default self-talk naturally becoming way more compassionate, realistic, and supportive. We're going to wrap up today's explainer with the 12th and arguably most provocative question of the whole bunch. Who do I want to become, and does this thought help me get there? I really want to leave you to reflect on that. It connects your momentary self-talk right up to your biggest life aspirations. So ask yourself, does your current inner dialogue actually serve the person you are striving to be? The power to evaluate and choose which thoughts you feed is entirely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me, and I highly encourage you to ask yourself that question today.